I guess just to say I don't think we fully understand, at least I do not fully understand, all the potential power of poetry. But it's been a long part of the human experience. And I think it's a characteristic of authoritarian cultures, whether capitalist or communist, to essentially want to control it or kill it. It was not for nothing that Plato in the Republic, one of the first descriptions of a totalitarian controlled society, wanted to outlaw poetry.
That's right.
Because poetry is subversive. Because poetry brings us into a better understanding of who we are and what is happening to us. You know, that is the key role of the poet, whether he is dealing with the pain of the human heart or the injustices of the system or whatever it might be. Norse is very eloquent when he's talking about homophobia. He is equally eloquent when he's talking about loneliness and rejection and isolation. You know, he embraces both the larger social issues and the intimate issues of the human condition. That's what poetry is about.
So isn't in this respect, I mean, the very fact a lot of the political poets, the left-wing poets, communist poets who try to reduce everything to politics, try to say the personal really doesn't exist, subsume it under the political, they are actually, in a way, reproducing the alienation of capitalism by other means.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because, you know, at its foundation, capitalism is intensely anti-individualistic. It may use a phony kind of individualist appeal, you know, as part of its false consciousness, as part of its social mythology. But basically it does not want individuals to be sensitive and thoughtful and reflective or in touch with their own feelings. And that is where poetry is ultimately subversive. That is why if you're going to have a perfect controlled capitalist order, or for that matter a totalitarian communist state, you have to kill all the poets. All of them. And take Ginsberg and Norse first. They're both dead now, but and who were their equivalents? Who are the voices now? I'm out of it. I don't know.
The SOS Brigade.
You gonna do it?
We're gonna do it. But I think I'm sure there's a lot of poets whose names we don't know. I mean, even Norse himself. We were talking about how he's sort of marginalized by the sort of the literary canonization of the beats. And, you know, Thomas McCrath's another name, very, you know, important and well known in their own circles. But there seems to be almost a selective process where certain writers get accepted into the canon. James Joyce. I'm not saying James Joyce, you know, I like James Joyce a lot. I like Faulkner. But what about Henry Miller? What about Nelson Algren? You know, what about Howard Norse? What about Charles Bukowski? All these people seem to not fit the mold of what is academically institutionalizable, to just coin a phrase. So,
you know, I like Gary Snyder's work a lot, and Michael McClure's, but I cannot figure out why they have achieved a kind of status that Norse doesn't have. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Maybe there's a kind of rawness to Norse and Bukowski and Ginsberg. Not Ginsberg so much, but Norse and Bukowski that...
Oh, it's in Ginsberg. He just gets away with it. He's shrewd. He knows how to do it.
Uh-huh.
He knows how to do it.
Was it just because of the way in which he was able to get to know people, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, and, you know, make the best use of his own resources, connections?
I'm not exactly sure about that. I think that is a part of it.
I mean, you invited him to Utah one time, didn't you?
Oh, yes. Yes, he was in Utah. Magnificent performance. He was a great showman. And I don't mean to be condescending about that or deprecating. He's a marvelous poet as well. There's great power in what he writes.
I was just reading Howell out to a couple of my students in my office, and it was like just the language just takes you over.
Yeah.
Intoxicating by its very essence. Yeah. There is no punctuation. You know, it just keeps flowing endlessly like a river on fire.
Yeah, I think more than anybody else I know, Ginsberg without even realizing what he was doing, revived an oral tradition of poetry that is of great antiquity and great power. And much of the stuff, not all of it, but much of the stuff is written in the cadence, the meter of the spoken word. And that in turn might explain why it's so prolix. There are an awful lot of throwaway lines in Ginsberg. That's another characteristic of oral literatures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As opposed to academic poetry, which makes it as controlled and contrived to a point of...
See, a lot of academic poetry, you have to spend a hell of a lot of time rereading it and trying wondering what in the hell that's all about. And sort of savoring the images or feeling the language. It's like a fine wine. It has to be sipped slowly, reflectively. Ginsberg is like a good beer. And just chug-a-lug it. That's a kind of bad image, but...
Well, there's a great poem by Thomas McGrath on beer, which I read to a few of my friends over the years.
Yeah.
It's lovely. You know, it does capture that essence of a proletarian spirit, the demotic language of poetry as it should be. And talks about the labor that goes into making beer, and of course the consumption among the working class. And not in a socialist, realist dogmatism, but very free, open, spacious.
Speaking of beer, help yourself to the refrigerator.
Okay.
Some out there.
Thanks.